President Trump promised during the campaign that he'd throw out the playbook on foreign affairs. And this week, he's been living up to that promise. On Tuesday, Trump fulfilled one campaign commitment by tearing up the Iran deal. That move earned a sharp rebuke from our allies. Almost immediately, tensions began to flare in the Middle East. And there are fears those tensions will turn to violence, with Iran punishing the Americans through its proxies in the region. And if Iran does restart its nuclear program, the threat of military action from Israel or the U.S. is a very real possibility. Tomorrow, a second promise becomes reality as the American embassy in Israel opens in Jerusalem. There you see Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner all arriving in Israel today as part of the president's delegation. But the region is bracing for protests, and there's already speculation that America's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital could kill any chance for peace in the Middle East. And next month, the president's promise to make better deals for America and to walk away from the table if necessary will be put to the test as Trump comes face-to-face with North Korea's leader. That historic summit now set for June 12th in Singapore. It already seems like President Trump is inching towards resolving North Korea's nuclear threat. Just yesterday, North Korea confirmed it will soon dismantle a nuclear test site at a public ceremony to ensure transparency, although there are doubts whether the site is even operable. And of course, we saw that historic prisoner release on Thursday. Trump on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews in the early morning hours, greeting the three Americans released by North Korea and praising leader Kim Jong-un. That's certainly a marked change from when I was last in the region, when the tension was palpable and the escalating rhetoric between Trump and Kim Jong-un seemed more like schoolyard taunts. But there's no guarantee of success at the summit, and the outcomes from those momentous moves this week are potentially far-reaching and unpredictable. Let's talk about that with the president's national security advisor, John Bolton. He's joining us live here in the studio this morning. Good morning, Ambassador. Great to see you on this Mother's Day. This meeting is unprecedented, of course, but the outcome historically of some high-level meetings are kind of predetermined. And President Trump says we're going to make a great deal for the world. You heard him say that. Mike Pompeo says the U.S. and North Korea have complete agreement about what the ultimate objectives are. So what kind of nuts and bolts are really left to negotiate here?
Well, I think the specifics are quite important, and I think the president's very optimistic because he sees the chance of a breakthrough, but I don't think he has stars in his eyes over this. I think what we need to see from Kim Jong-un is that he and the entire North Korean regime have made a strategic decision that they will be better off without weapons of mass destruction. And I think one advantage of having this meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un so soon, in effect, without months and months and months of preparation, is that President Trump will be able to size Kim Jong-un up and see whether the commitment is real.
So what's really non-negotiable?
Well, I think the denuclearization is absolutely at the core of it, and it means not just the nuclear weapons. North Korea has previously agreed several times, in fact, to give up its uranium enrichment and plutonium reprocessing capabilities. We've got the ballistic missile issue is on the table. We've got to look at chemical and biological weapons. There are a range of things to discuss, and so that is really whether Kim Jong-un will come through on this, and it's the reason why the president is both optimistic but realistic at the same time.
And let's go back to those terms: permanent, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That's what has to happen.
Right, and that's something that has to happen before the benefits start to flow. I think the objective for North Korea is to see whether they want to become a normal nation.
So the benefit, you say before the benefits have to flow. So we would give them nothing until all of this has happened, not just beginning it?
We want to see the denuclearization process so completely underway that it's irreversible.
So what does that look like?
Well, I think the implementation of the decision means getting rid of all the nuclear weapons, dismantling them, taking them to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It means getting rid of the uranium enrichment and plutonium reprocessing capabilities. It means addressing the ballistic missile issue, a lot of things like that. And North Korea has a very extensive program. Nobody believes that this is easy to do. It's going to require some discussion with North Korea. They're going to have to reveal all of their locations. They're going to have to allow open inspection. The International Atomic Energy Agency will have a role. The actual deconstruction of the nuclear weapons, I think, will be by the United States, perhaps with the assistance from others, because that's not really in the IAEA's remit. We hope to do it very quickly, and this is really
one day. Do you agree on all this in one day, however?
Well, we'll see how far they get. I was speaking of the operationalization.
I know that, but you can determine all this in one day, you think?
Well, I think that we will at least see whether the decision on North Korea's part to give up nuclear weapons is something that they're prepared to carry through on. Then other discussions could occur. I don't think anybody believes you're going to sign the complete ending of the nuclear program in one day. But we are also very much interested in operationalizing the commitment as quickly as possible. And that is in North Korea's interest. When you say how long it will take for the benefits to flow, in many respects, that's in North Korea's hands. If they want to see opening to the rest of the world, if they want to become a normal nation like South Korea, the quicker they denuclearize, the quicker that will come.
Kim has stopped testing nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles. He released those prisoners, but he is in a very strong negotiating position because of his nuclear weapons capabilities and his ballistic missiles. So what do you think he wants in return?
Well, if he wants to be a normal nation, if he wants to have normal relations with the rest of the world, if he wants trade and investment to be possible for his desperately poor country, this is the path to do it. Nuclear weapons don't make North Korea safer. They don't make it more prosperous. Anybody who's any doubt about what North Korea is like, take a look at the famous pictures of the Korean Peninsula at night. The South is lit up. You can almost draw the lines of the coastline. North Korea, you can't tell the difference between North Korea and the Yellow Sea on the west.
It's quite remarkable, really. I've talked to a lot of pilots about that. It's amazing.
So that's the choice Kim Jong-un can make if he gives up his nuclear capabilities.
Okay, Mike Pompeo said that if North Korea takes bold action to quickly denuclearize, the United States is prepared to work with North Korea to achieve prosperity on par with South Korea. So is what you're saying, is what he's saying, the administration is prepared to make an economic commitment to North Korea?
I think we're prepared to open to trade and investment with North Korea as soon as we can.
And will the U.S. consider any sanctions relief before you see what you outlined there?
We need to see implementation, and I don't think the present policy is going to change until that happens.
Okay, before becoming National Security Advisor, you were pretty negative about Kim Jong-un. You didn't trust him. You famously said, "How do you know the North Korean regime is lying? Their lips are moving." Obviously, the U.S. is going to want verification of all of this, which you have outlined. But just in this last month, since you became National Security Advisor, has your opinion of Kim changed? Have you seen a different Kim? Have you learned anything about him that's changed your opinion?
Well, let me just say, as a general proposition, I've read and said a lot of things in the past. I was a free agent. It was a wonderful way to be able to get your opinions about. But I'm not going to compare and contrast what I said over a long period of time with what I do now, because the advice that I give to the president, I give to him and not to discuss. I think the key point here is that the president's going to make the decision when he sits down with Kim Jong-un just what exactly the North is up to, and he'll size him up, and he's got an outstanding ability to do that, and we'll see what comes from it.
I want to go back to that. I wasn't wanting you to compare. I want to know if there's anything you've learned about him, obviously not classified, but just from looking at him or seeing what actions he's taken. Is it possible that he wasn't the man you thought he was months ago, that he really does want to open up his country and change? Is he not the dictator you thought he was?
Well, I suppose I could duck that by saying you really ought to ask Mike Pompeo, who's had the pleasure of meeting him twice. I don't think this is a question of psychoanalyzing Kim Jong-un. I think it's a question of what he's prepared to do concretely and operationally.
And we were all so happy to see those American prisoners released, but it really did bring to mind Otto Warmbier, who died 6 days after he was here because he was severely brain damaged. Do you think he was tortured, or they inadvertently killed him?
Well, I don't think that there's much doubt that his condition was due to his treatment in North Korean prisons, and we've seen the same pattern of behavior over the years. That's the kind of pattern of behavior that's simply unacceptable.
But do you think he was tortured?
Look, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it goes to the critical point. If North Korea really wants to be a normal nation, that has to be not only ceased, it has to be exposed in the past for the benefit, for example, of the families in Japan whose children were kidnapped by North Korea over a period of years. Now, if the North is prepared to go ahead with that, if they really want to change their behavior, they have a very bright future ahead of them.
And I want to move on to the Iran deal in a moment, but the president has criticized Iran and the Iran deal because it didn't address human rights. The State Department says North Korea violates human rights of those within its borders every day. Kim Jong-un is accused of killing his half-brother. So does the president intend to push Kim on human rights during this summit?
Well, I think he's certainly going to raise the question of the Japanese abductees. Prime Minister Abe of Japan asked him to do it. He said he would. The South Koreans are very concerned about South Korean citizens who have been kidnapped over the years, and it's a proper subject to raise.
And beyond that?
Well, I think this first meeting is going to be on the critical issue primarily of denuclearization. There are other subjects to discuss with North Korea, and I think it would be a factor for American businesses, other foreign businesses, about whether they're going to be involved in investment in North Korea if the climate doesn't change.
Okay, and back on that Iran deal, what parts of the so-called JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, did Iran violate in your eyes? The allies say nothing, the inspectors say nothing?
Well, the inspectors don't know everything. I mean, you can't say honestly that Iran didn't violate the deal because we don't have adequate inspections. We only know
the most robust in the world.
Well, that's wrong. That's just simply wrong. We have never had an adequate declaration from Iran of their prior military activities in connection with the nuclear program. It was a fundamental flaw of Barack Obama and John Kerry's negotiation of the deal that they gave that up. That just violates every precept of sound arms control negotiation. Nor have we had, since the implementation of the deal, adequate, really any inspection of military facilities where the weaponization activities of the Iranians might be conducted. And I think what we saw when the Israelis released this treasure trove of prior information is that there very definitely was a prior military dimension, which gives the lie to the Iranian assertion that they didn't want nuclear weapons. Moreover, during the entire course...
Which they knew when they signed this, correct?
So, right. If you believe what you've just said, and if Barack Obama and John Kerry believe what you just said, they lied to the American people. Because in Resolution 2231, the fifth preambular paragraph, where it says we welcome Iran's reaffirming that they don't have any intention to have a nuclear weapons program, it was a lie at the time. The administration then knew it was a lie and accepted it anyway. The Israeli information shows that on the weaponization aspect, Iran is one file drawer away from being pulled out to being right back on track, and that's only what's in the files. We have no idea what they've done since then. This network revealed in 2007 the weaponization activities in Parchin, Iran, which the Iranians have flatly denied ever since. That's the kind of background that leads you to believe that the Iranians never had any real intention of complying.
So Ambassador Bolton, in the interim, are we safer? How can we know about their nuclear weapons program?
Well, I think we have inadequate information on the nuclear weapons program now. So the real answer to your question is we don't know. Since we don't know where they are now, we won't know where they are for sure in the near future. But I will tell you, if you look at the advances that Iran has made under cover of this agreement, its conventional military and terrorist advances in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, since 2015, Iran was really on the march. They were shifting the balance of power in the Middle East. least until President Trump got out of this deal.
Would you advocate for regime change?
That's not the policy of the administration. The policy of the administration is to make sure that Iran never gets close to deliverable nuclear weapons.
And reports this morning in the New York Times say that the United States and Europe had reached consensus on 90% of a supplemental agreement, according to people involved in the talks. Is that true?
I don't believe it's true. I've read the text of the supplemental agreement. It did not address the basic flaws in the agreement that President Trump identified. And by the way, President Trump identified these flaws 2 years ago. Nobody in the world, nobody should be surprised that the president's entirely consistent view on the negative aspects of this deal finally materialized on Tuesday, and the U.S. getting out of the deal.
The leaders of the UK, France, Germany issued a joint statement emphasizing their, quote, continued commitment to the nuclear deal. They say that Iran has been compliant and, quote, the world is a safer place as a result. The new U.S. ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell, tweeted this after that. As real, Donald Trump said U.S. sanctions will target critical sectors of Iran's economy. German companies doing business in Iran should wind down operations immediately. The ambassador is just making a suggestion, of course, not a demand. But will the U.S. punish countries or companies who keep ties with Iran?
Well, I think the president said in his statement on Tuesday that countries that continue to deal with Iran could face U.S. sanctions. Europeans are going to face the effect of U.S. sanctions, already are really, because much of what they'd like to sell to Iran involves U.S. technology for which the licenses will not be available. This was part of the flaw of the deal, to entice Europe and the United States into economic relations with Iran that eventually would have worked against really holding Iran accountable for violations of the deal. It's reminiscent of the saying attributed to Vladimir Lenin that the capitalist will sell us the rope with which we'll hang them. That's what's wrong with this deal. Why would any business, why would the shareholders of any business want to do business with the world's central banker of international terrorism?
I want to turn to the German magazine Der Spiegel. They put a graphic up on the cover of their magazine depicting Donald Trump essentially giving our allies the finger. And they wrote this in an editorial. The West, as we once knew it, no longer exists. It is impossible to overstate what Trump has dismantled in the last 16 months. Europe has lost its protective power. It has lost its guarantor of joint values, and it has lost the global political influence that it was only able to exert because the U.S. stood by its side. Are you concerned withdrawal will drive a wedge between the U.S. and its European allies?
Well, I think the comment you've just read is silly. I don't think it reflects the reality. I think the Europeans are disappointed that we got out of the deal. Perhaps they feel that way in large part because representatives of the Obama administration were working in the past several weeks to try and prevent the deal for the U.S. from abrogating the deal, and may have given the Europeans the false impression that they could prevail. I think we're going to work with all of the Europeans, as President Trump has discussed with President Macron of France, with Chancellor Merkel of Germany, with Prime Minister May of England, to move beyond the deal. We all share the common objective of making sure Iran never gets nuclear weapons. We're worried about their terribly destabilizing and threatening military behavior across the region and their ballistic missile program, and we're going to work to stop that.
And just finally, Mr. Ambassador, the American embassy in Jerusalem opening tomorrow. Will that make it harder or easier to get any sort of peace agreement?
I think it will make it easier. You know, it's a recognition of reality. If you're not prepared to recognize that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and that's where the American embassy should be, then you're operating on a completely different wavelength. I think recognizing reality always enhances the chances for peace.
Okay, with that, we'll end it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When we come back...